She thought her wealth made her untouchable, but she never expected who would stand up to her in the end. What do you think about how each character acted in this story? Share your perspective in the comments below. If you find this story meaningful, give it a like and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful lessons that inspire and surprise. The golden lights of Maison Lumière, Los Angeles' most exclusive restaurant, danced across the marble floors, reflecting the pristine elegance of the evening. A warm hum of activity filled the room as diners murmured over crystal glasses, waiters glided between tables with practiced precision, and the subtle aroma of truffle risotto and seared lamb wafted through the air. Amid this luxury, Sophia, a waitress with tired eyes but a determined spirit, balanced a tray of drinks as she weaved between tables. Her uniform, though neatly pressed, couldn't quite hide the weariness etched on her face. She had been on her feet for 8 hours already, and her double shift was far from over. Sophia wasn't just working for herself. As a single mother of 2 young children, 8-year-old Jada and 5-year-old Malcolm, her income was a lifeline. Every paycheck was meticulously budgeted for rent, school supplies, daycare, and groceries. Her mornings began with rushing the kids to school and ended with tucking them in late at night, long after she returned home. Tonight, though, it felt heavier than usual. Her phone buzzed faintly in her pocket during a quiet moment in the kitchen. She stole a glance, a message from Jada. "Love you, Mommy. We're proud of you." Sophia smiled softly, the small gesture giving her the strength to push through the long hours ahead. At the heart of the dining room, seated at a prime table that offered a view of nearly every corner, sat Victoria Hale. Victoria didn't simply occupy the table. She commanded it. Draped in a striking red dress that accentuated her stature and dripping in diamonds that caught every flicker of light, she exuded the type of wealth that spoke of old money, privilege, and an unshakable sense of superiority. Victoria's 2 companions, equally adorned in designer couture, leaned in attentively as she regaled them with stories of her latest luxury retreat. Her voice carried effortlessly across the dining room, each word steeped in an air of entitlement. "It's so exhausting," she drawled, swirling her glass of wine. "Coordinating with private staff is a nightmare these days. You can't find decent help anymore. It's like no one takes pride in their work." The women nodded vigorously, their laughter ringing out as though Victoria had just delivered a cutting punchline. She smirked, clearly reveling in the attention. Just as Victoria was finishing her anecdote, Sophia approached their table, balancing a tray of appetizers with the precision and grace honed over years of hard work. She smiled warmly as she placed the plates down in front of each diner. "Good evening, ladies," Sophia began, her voice even and polite despite the faint tremor in her hands. "Here are your starters. I hope you enjoy them." Victoria arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow as she stared at the plate before her. Her lips curled into a sneer as she leaned back in her chair, eyeing Sophia as though the waitress had just tracked mud into her pristine home. "Is this what you call artichoke carpaccio?" she said, her voice thick with incredulity. "Because it looks like something my gardener might toss together with leftover weeds. Where's the finesse? The attention to detail? Or do you not bother with such things here?" Sophia blinked, momentarily caught off guard. She quickly recovered, keeping her tone steady. "I'm very sorry. Ma'am, if you'd like, I can have the kitchen prepare a fresh plate for you right away." Victoria let out a sharp laugh, the sound echoing across the room. "Oh, darling, I wouldn't bother. If this is the standard here, I don't have high hopes for a second attempt. You'd probably bring it back worse. You know what they say, mediocrity can't fix itself." Sophia's cheeks flushed, but she nodded politely. "Thank you for your feedback. Ma'am, I'll let the chef know." As Sophia turned to leave, Victoria's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Wait." Sophia stopped, turning back to face her. Victoria leaned forward, a smug smile playing on her lips. "Tell me something, sweetheart," she said, the word sweetheart dripping with condescension. "Do you actually like working here? Or is this just a temporary situation?" Sophia hesitated, unsure how to respond. Yes, ma'am, I enjoy my job." Victoria tilted her head, feigning curiosity. "Really? Because I can't imagine anyone aspiring to this. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's adorable that you're trying. But surely there's something more fitting for someone like you, something that doesn't involve customer-facing roles." Sophia's grip on the tray tightened imperceptibly. She could feel the weight of Victoria's words, the unspoken implication hanging heavy in the air. Victoria, seemingly emboldened by Sophia's silence, leaned back in her chair and turned to her friends. It's tragic. Really? She said loudly enough for nearby diners to hear. Places like this lower their standards just to fill positions. I mean, it's not exactly a high bar, but still. I guess this is what happens when you hire anyone willing to put on an apron. The women at her table erupted in laughter, their mirth cruel and unrestrained. Nearby diners exchanged uneasy glances. A man at the next table shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. A woman seated farther away muttered something to her companion, who nodded in agreement. Sophia stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether to respond or retreat. She chose the latter, offering a faint smile before walking away, her back straight but her steps heavier than before. As she disappeared into the kitchen, Victoria turned her attention back to her friends. Honestly, she said, shaking her head, people like that don't belong in places like this. It's a waste of time and resources. If I were running things, I'd make sure only the best were hired. None of this charity case nonsense. The words hung in the air like a sour note, carrying across the dining room and settling uncomfortably in the ears of those who heard them. In a quiet corner of the dining room, Keanu Reeves, dressed in the understated uniform of a waiter, observed the unfolding scene with a steady gaze. His dark blazer and simple black apron helped him blend seamlessly with the staff, allowing him to move unnoticed through the elegant chaos of Maison Lumière. Keanu had owned the restaurant for years, building it with the philosophy that great food and excellent service could only thrive in an environment of mutual respect. But he also understood that not every guest shared those values. That's why he often disguised himself as a waiter, to see the restaurant from the perspective of those who worked tirelessly to uphold its reputation. Tonight, however, he hadn't expected such an overt display of cruelty. From his vantage point, Keanu had seen everything: the way Victoria's lips curled with disdain as she scrutinized Sophia, the carefully hidden exhaustion in Sophia's eyes as she endured the onslaught, and the discomfort rippling through the other diners. His fingers tapped lightly against the edge of his tray, his expression calm but thoughtful. Sophia re-entered the kitchen, her head held high despite the faint tremble in her hands. She busied herself refilling water glasses, but Keanu noticed the way her shoulders slumped ever so slightly, betraying the weight of the moment. He approached her quietly, his footsteps soft against the tiled floor. "Sophia," he said, his voice low and steady. She turned, startled for a moment, before recognizing him as a fellow waiter. "Yes?" she asked, her tone polite but distant, as though bracing for yet another critique. "You handled that well," Keanu said simply. Sophia blinked, surprised. "I'm not sure I did." She hesitated, then shook her head. "Some people just expect more than we can give." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "And some people forget that how they treat others says more about them than it does about the person they're addressing." Sophia smiled faintly, though her eyes remained downcast. "Thanks," she murmured. "I just want to get through the shift without making things worse." "You're doing more than that," Keanu said. "You're doing great." Sophia met his gaze for a brief moment, gratitude flickering in her expression, before turning back to her task. Keanu lingered for a moment longer, watching as she carefully arranged a tray of glasses. Then, with a deep breath, he straightened his posture and returned to the dining room. His mind set. Victoria and her friends were deep in conversation when Keanu approached their table, carrying a fresh bread basket. His steps were measured, his expression neutral. "Good evening, ladies," he said, placing the basket in the center of the table. "I hope everything is going well." Victoria glanced up, her lips curling in mild annoyance. "Well, that depends," she said sharply. "Are you here to finally bring us some proper service? Because if so, I have a long list of grievances for you to address." Keanu nodded, unbothered by her tone. "I'd be happy to hear your feedback," he replied. Victoria straightened in her chair, clearly relishing the opportunity to vent. "For starters, your waitress is completely unprofessional, slow, clumsy, and frankly out of her depth. I don't know where you find these people, but it's obvious she doesn't belong in a place like this." Her friends giggled in agreement, their laughter sharp and grating. Keanu tilted his head slightly, his expression thoughtful. "That's unfortunate to hear," he said evenly. "Could you tell me exactly what made you feel that way?" Victoria's brow furrowed, as though annoyed that he hadn't immediately agreed with her. "I shouldn't have to explain myself. Isn't it obvious?" The way she stumbled, Her lack of confidence is also unbecoming. If she can't handle this job, she shouldn't be here. Simple as that. Keanu's gaze didn't waver. I see. And do you think you'd feel differently if you knew more about her situation? Victoria blinked, caught off guard. What does that have to do with anything? This is a professional establishment, not a charity. I'm paying for excellent service, not excuses. Keanu smiled faintly, though the warmth didn't quite reach his eyes. Sophia, the waitress you mentioned, is a single mother. She's raising two young children while working double shifts to provide for her family. She comes to work every day with a commitment to doing her best, even when she's exhausted. Victoria's smirk faltered for a split second, but she quickly recovered. That's all very touching, she said dismissively, but it doesn't change the fact that she's not up to standard. If she can't handle the pressure, maybe she should look for something more suitable. Keanu nodded slowly, as though considering her words. Then, with deliberate calm, he said, It's interesting, isn't it? How quick we are to judge people without understanding what they're carrying, and how often we overlook the impact of our own words and actions. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line, her confidence wavering slightly under his steady gaze. Her friends exchanged nervous glances, sensing the shift in tone. At that moment, the restaurant manager approached, his expression a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. He leaned in to whisper something to Keanu, but Keanu raised a hand, signaling him to wait. Straightening, Keanu removed the name tag from his uniform, revealing the sleek logo of Maison Lumière embroidered on his shirt. My name is Keanu Reeves, he said, his voice carrying through the now quiet dining room. I'm the owner of this restaurant. The dining room fell silent. Conversations halted, forks paused midair, and every pair of eyes turned toward Victoria's table. Victoria's jaw dropped, her usual air of superiority replaced by visible discomfort. You're the owner? She stammered. Keanu nodded. Yes, and I take pride in ensuring that this establishment is not just known for its food, but for the respect and dignity with which we treat everyone, staff and guests alike. He turned to Sophia, who had cautiously approached the scene, her expression a mix of confusion and awe. Sophia, Keanu said warmly, you've shown incredible professionalism and strength tonight. You've faced unfair scrutiny with grace, and I want you to know how much I value you as a part of this team. Sophia's eyes welled with tears, but she managed a small, grateful smile. Thank you. Mr. Reeves, she whispered. Keanu returned his gaze to Victoria. As for you, Miss Holly, he said, his tone firm but civil, your behavior tonight was not just disrespectful, it was unacceptable. And while I can't change the way you choose to treat people, I can ensure that your actions have a positive outcome. He gestured toward the manager, who held a clipboard with Victoria's bill. Your tab tonight will be donated in full to a local organization that supports single mothers like Sophia, women who work tirelessly to provide for their families despite the odds stacked against them. Victoria's face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth to protest but found no words. Her friends avoided meeting her gaze, their earlier laughter replaced by awkward silence. The silence in the dining room was almost deafening. Victoria's carefully curated composure had cracked under the weight of Keanu's words. Her once confident smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped expression that teetered between shock and humiliation. Her friends exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure how to salvage the moment. One of them, a woman with short blonde hair and an increasingly sheepish expression, broke the silence. I think this is being blown out of proportion, she said weakly. Victoria didn't mean to offend anyone. She was just misunderstood. Keanu turned his steady gaze toward her. His tone was calm but resolute as he replied, Intent doesn't erase impact. Words carry weight, and the way we treat others, especially those who serve us, matters. Tonight, Ms. Hale's words didn't just hurt Sophia, they echoed throughout this room, and they revealed more about her character than about the person she was criticizing. The blonde woman looked down at her lap, and Victoria, still silent, clutched her purse tightly, her knuckles white. Keanu continued, addressing the room as much as the table before him. Respect is the foundation of this establishment. It's not just about the food we serve or the elegance of the setting. It's about the people who make it all possible. Every member of our team, from the chefs to the servers to the dishwashers, contributes to the experience we provide. They deserve our appreciation, not our derision. The room seemed to exhale collectively. Patrons nodded in agreement, murmurs of approval rippling through the crowd. Keanu's gaze softened as he turned back to Sophia. Take a moment for yourself, he said gently. You've earned it. Sophia hesitated, her pride battling with her exhaustion. But as she met Keanu's eyes, she felt a wave of relief and gratitude. She nodded and stepped away toward the back of the restaurant, her posture a little straighter than before. As Sophia disappeared into the kitchen, Keanu addressed Victoria one final time. Tonight isn't about punishment. Ms. Hayla, it's about accountability. I hope this moment gives you a chance to reflect not just on the words you use, but on the legacy you want to leave behind. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her face burned with embarrassment as she fumbled with her purse. Finally, she rose from her chair, her movements stiff and mechanical. Her friends quickly followed suit, their discomfort palpable. As Victoria walked toward the exit, she kept her gaze fixed firmly ahead, avoiding the stares of the other diners. At the door, she paused briefly and glanced back at the room she had once dominated with her laughter. For the first time, she seemed smaller, quieter, less sure of herself. Outside, the crisp night air greeted her like a wake-up call. Her friends attempted to console her with platitudes, but their words rang hollow. It wasn't that bad, one of them said. People will forget by tomorrow. Victoria said nothing. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar, shame. Back in the restaurant, the atmosphere began to shift. The tension that had gripped the room earlier gave way to a quiet warmth. Several patrons signaled for their checks, and as they passed by Sophia's station, they stopped to offer kind words. You handled yourself beautifully tonight, said an older woman, her eyes kind. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, added a younger couple, slipping an extra tip into her tray. Sophia, though still overwhelmed by the events of the evening, felt a new sense of validation. The support from the diners and, most importantly, from Keanu reignited her confidence. She returned to the kitchen briefly to take a deep breath. Her thoughts turned to her children, Jada and Malcolm, who would be fast asleep by now. Tomorrow morning, when she packed their lunches and helped them get ready for school, she would tell them about tonight, not about the hurtful words, but about the kindness that had followed. Her manager approached her with a warm smile. Sophia, he said, I want you to know how proud we all are of you. And Mr. Reeves, well, I think you saw how much he respects you. Sophia nodded, her voice steady despite the emotion welling in her chest. Thank you, she replied. That means a lot. Keanu, now seated at a quiet corner table, sipped a glass of water as the last few patrons made their way out. Several diners stopped by his table to express their admiration. You don't see people stand up like that anymore, said an older man, tipping his hat. That was something special. Keanu smiled faintly. It wasn't about standing up. It was about doing what's right. As the doors closed for the night, Keanu gathered his things and prepared to leave. But before he did, he sought out Sophia in the kitchen. I'll see you tomorrow, he said warmly. Sophia smiled, exhaustion still etched on her face, but softened by gratitude. Good night, Mr. Reeves, and thank you for everything. Keanu gave her a small nod, his expression one of quiet pride. The next day, whispers of the incident spread through the restaurant and beyond. The staff felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing they worked for someone who truly valued them. Patrons who had witnessed the moment left bigger tips and spoke kindly to the staff, carrying the lesson of the night into their own lives. As for Victoria, no one could say for sure how the experience changed her. But those who knew her noticed she had become quieter, less quick to criticize, and perhaps, just perhaps, a little more thoughtful. For Sophia, the night became a story she would carry with her forever, not as a tale of hardship, but as a reminder that kindness and respect can prevail, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. In the end, the lesson was clear. Kindness costs nothing, but it has the power to change everything. And sometimes, the simplest acts of decency can shine the brightest in the darkest of moments.